Hi folks, this is Essex Electrical Training. We are a training centre. We train you from a beginner to become an electrician, and we teach electricians further electrical courses. A lot of criticism of intensive courses and short courses, and I hope that I'll dispel that myth that they're inferior. But you do have to choose your training centre. You do have to choose one that's going to teach you a proper trade. And we like to think at Essex Electrical Training we do. We are unique almost in the UK. Our electricians do everything. You don't find that very often in the rest of the world, and especially in the United States. What it is our electricians do everything. So we will start off with basic wiring, house wiring, you know, all that sort of thing. We go on to motors and metal conduit, steel conduit, steel trunking, all cable. We do ladder rack, we do armoured cable, large and small. Here you will go under floorboards and through joists and all that sort of thing. Why? Because the UK electrician, as I say, does a whole range of jobs. That's not often for, in the United States you'll have different guys or girls doing different bits of the trade. Very often in Europe you'll have, it's the line between industrial electricians, commercial electricians, domestic electricians more defined. But here we teach you everything. It be from domestic to commercial to industrial. Now, second question is why? Why do we need so many electricians? Well, we do. It's as simple as that. The trade is expanding in all directions and we need the people to meet that demand. Why? Well, as I've said, UK electricians do everything. And if we don't have enough electricians, there is no way that they are going to turn around and say, we can't build that building because there's not enough electricians. We can't do this expansion because there's not enough electricians. They will de-skill this trade and we will be like almost the rest of the world. We won't have electricians that are doing everything. They'll do different parts of the job. Another criticism of short courses, and this is what we are offering a short course. It is a short course intensive. You're here every day. There's no wasted time. There's no like colleges, oh, Mr. Simpson's not in today, so can you read your books? And you know, if you use inferior equipment, we use Hilti, which is a really good trade name. We use Mega, the latest Megas. We use Weir electric screwdrivers and a full range of Weir tools. You use the best. Anyway. How did it all start off? Funny, really. It's funny how it started off. It's got a bit of strange history as electrical. For years and years and years, it was just everybody thought that electricity, and the only electricity they knew was static electricity and lightning, was God-given. The explanation for everything was, oh, well, it's God. It would come to a period in history called the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was where people were no longer willing to accept that everything was God-given. And the big names in our industry, George Ohm, Andre Ampere, Volta, they all contribute, they all knew each other, and they all contributed to the same thing. Go forward a bit in history and it comes to the start of commercial electricity was, let's start off, we're in the UK, so we'll start off at Michael Faraday. Michael Faraday, he discovered induction. So he wasn't really talking about static anymore and lightning, he was talking about induction. Electricity that you could produce as much as you wanted for as long as you wanted. It was sustained. He was a scientist, he wasn't a businessman. And it really comes to an American that took this idea forward, and his name was Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison was an inventor, yes, but he wasn't a man slaving away in his garden shed coming up with all these inventions. He was an industrialist. He had offices all over the world, and his idea was to electrify the world, but he used DC, DC dynamos, which the same as, you know, you used to power your old car. So he was DC, but his generators weren't really efficient. He wanted to improve the efficiency. So he put the sign out really and said, well, is there anybody in our organisation that knows a lot about dynamos and can improve them? And well, someone piped up and said, yes, there's one guy working in our Paris office. He's pretty good. So he said, oh right, okay, what's his name? His name's Nikola Tesla. So he said, get Nikola Tesla over to the United States and get him to improve our dynamos. Well, that all happened. But the only thing is, there's some strange stories in the development of electricity, and this was one of them. Thomas Edison said to Nikola Tesla, if you can improve the efficiency of that dynamo by anything up approaching 20%, then I'll give you $150,000. So Nikola Tesla did. He was a genius, and he got to work, and he did improve it. Instead of giving him the $150,000, Thomas Edison said, Nikola, the trouble is you don't understand the American sense of humour, and he gave him an $8 a month rise. That was the first sort of chink in their relationship. The second one was Nikola Tesla said to Edison that AC, alternating current, is going to be far superior to DC, direct current. Edison sacked him. Nikola Tesla, who all the cars are named after, big companies named after, dug the roads because he was out of work. That's how, this man was reduced. But he was picked up by a guy called George Westinghouse. George Westinghouse invented the air brake on the American railways, and railways were sweeping from east to west across America. He's a hugely rich man. He said, we are going to go with your idea, AC. And the two sides literally went to industrial war with each other. It was called the Battle of the Currents. Edison's DC versus Tesla and Westinghouse's AC. Well, it went toward you go to a state fair, and before your very eyes, because Thomas Edison employed a bloke called Brown, who was a bit sinister, and he started electrocuting cats, dogs and horses in front of your very eyes to demonstrate how dangerous AC was. It went on and on until we come to a period where it turns a bit sinister. There was an Edison crew working in a small village in the United States, and one of them was working by a cable, and suddenly they looked round and there he was on the floor. They said, oh my God, we need a doctor, we need a doctor. So they said, well, this town's too small for a doctor, but we've got a dentist. So they got this dentist. This dentist that they got was also experimenting with anaesthesia. So he turned up, there he was, he said, what happened? Well, that guy was working by that cable, and now he's on the floor. He examined him, he said he's dead. So he had present a place where a man had touched an electric cable and died instantly. What do you think he invented? He went back and invented the electric chair. The electric chair. So what happens is then Edison backed him in secret, and the two conditions. He said, I'll back you, but never link my name with it, and it must be AC that kills people. I don't want a machine that kills people using DC. So then we're waiting for our first lucky customer. Our first lucky customer was William Kemmler. William Kemmler killed his girlfriend, chopped her up, and put her in bits in the bath, and then marched into a police station and confessed. So he was due to be executed. Through the American courts, hanging was going down as cruel and unusual punishment. And therefore they come up with this idea where we can dispatch a man within 3 seconds, humanely. So therefore, William Kemmler was going to go to the electric chair. Westinghouse found out, he financed his appeal, but he was hopeless. He confessed and he said he'd done it, and so then he said, well, electrocution is cruel and unusual punishment. That failed as well. Kemmler did go to the electric chair. Unfortunately, it wasn't 3 seconds. He was on the chair for about 11 minutes. And that is because electricity much prefers you outside. Your skin is a much lower resistance than your inside squelchy bits. But anyway, that's another story. What happened from then on, it was the development of electricity and how we found it in our homes. The first electricity in this country was about 1882, I believe, and it was an Edison generator generating lights over Westminster Bridge. And at that time, remember, the UK was, we usually used to think that, you know, electricity had been around for ages. It's not. In 1914, there was about 6% of homes that had electricity. And there was no electricians. What you'd do is it started off in commercial, so they'd put a tram station, generating station, or the tube railways. They was generating stations that powered those was way before domestic electricity. So you'd have a team turn up at your house and say, do you fancy electricity? It's coming to, we're putting a generating station down the road, do you fancy it? And it didn't catch on. Number one, a bloke called Frank Windsor had invented the gas mantle, which is really, really brilliant, really, really lovely, and lovely light. And a light bulb in those days lasted about 7 hours. Also, the furthest away you was from the generating station, the lower the voltage. But nevertheless, you'd have this team turn up. They would put electricity in your homes. They struggled with insulation, not with the conductors. They had, machines that made rope and cord and all that sort of thing. So that wasn't a struggle. It was the insulation. In those days, they used a thing called knob and tube wiring. Knob and tube wiring. What was knob and tube wiring? What was carried out by carpenters. The reason it was carpenters is because through the joists, you'd have a series of holes all in line. Through those holes, they'd put a ceramic tube, and then at the end of one joist, they would attach a bare wire that would wrap around the knob. It would go all through the ceramic tubes to the other joist and wrap around another knob. And then from that knob, it would go to the wall, wrap around another knob, then up the wall, usually behind architrave. And then a small bit of insulation in the form of tape, usually cloth, tar impregnated tape, into the switch. There was huge amount of accidents to the carpenters, stroke electricians that was doing it, and to the householders. That was when our first electrical regulations came out in 1882. But then it was slowly developing. 1930, about 30% of homes had electricity, but they really had to standardise it, because up to that time you could be on AC, DC, all different voltages. They had to standardise it. And in this country, we did one thing good. We can criticise the government for a lot of things, but we standardised first the voltage, and then we developed the national grid and all that sort of thing, which the national grid is the envy of the world. It's really, really good system. But there was no training of electricians. You just learned on the job. You was a mate. We have to go forward to the Second World War. At the end of the Second World War, there was obviously people injured fighting for this country, and they needed something. They come out of the war and they was injured. They had very poor prospects of employment, so they developed training courses for these mainly guys, that's when the first technical colleges emerged, teaching a trade all the way through. So you're going to learning little bits. It's a very, very simple course, but it was the first time electricians were, a standalone trade, because that's going to the commercial sector and everything had to be standardised. We come to around about the end of the 50s, 1959, something like that, and they said, we've got to examine apprenticeships, because this is what they was, apprenticeships. How well are they working? And they had a Queen's Commission that went into it, and the result of this was that an apprenticeship was largely a waste of time, I'm afraid. That's what they said. They said, why have a man on an apprenticeship of 3 years when they're learning something that you could learn in 3 months? Not my words, that was the Queen's Commission. And so therefore, I was an indentured apprentice. An indentured apprentice in those days, I couldn't be sacked because the firm owned me. I signed my name over to them. I was their licensed slave. So that's why they couldn't sack me. But by the same token, I could turn around and say to them, I'm not doing enough trunking. I'm not doing enough conduit. And they would have to put you on trunking and conduit, because that was a trade-off. You was their slave, but they had to teach you a trade. The indentured apprenticeships, they ended in about 1977, 1978, because the big electrical firms and even the unions as well said, well, we can't have youngsters like I was dictating to firms. So firms got rid of it. So now, what is the present situation? You can have an apprentice that will do a 3-year apprentice. He'll go to college 1 day a week. An indentured apprentice went for 13 weeks, then 6 weeks, then 6 weeks, then 5 weeks. It was a block where you learned and then you was out on the job. You need to learn electrical trade on the job. We here at Essex Electrical Training, we try and do our best. I mean, you can see the way we're rigged up, and you will do everything. Nothing will be strange to you when you go into electrical work. You will be able to work alongside another electrician without asking him every 5 minutes what to do here and what to do there. But an apprenticeship, it's difficult. The government have just stopped funding level 2 in their wisdom. And also there's very little regulation on it. An apprentice can just do local authority work for the whole of his apprenticeship. And that's just domestic wiring. No, it's never coming across ladder rack and trunking and conduit and all that sort of thing. We've brought out a scheme where you need a gold card, and that brings in a certain, where you've got to prove that you have a certain mix of work, and we think that we qualify you for that. We see you all through your MVQ level 3. But our intensive course is 17 weeks that lasts fully intensive, hands-on, full-on, every day. We believe it compares favourably with going to college for 1 day a week, where you're using inferior materials, and I feel sorry for colleges because the money's just not there. They often have teachers, I'm sorry to say, they've never done the job themselves, or haven't done the jobs for 30 years, and things change every week, let alone that, so you need to keep up to date. Essex Electrical Training, we work as well. We've got an electrical contractors firm, and we work and we train. So it's electricians teaching you to become electricians. So all I'll say is, don't, if people criticise intensive courses, but there's good and bad. Choose your centre wisely. Never part with any money before visiting the centre. You visit the centre first. See what they're going to offer you. See how you're going to be equipped. The last thing you need to do is do a whole training course and then not be equipped to actually perform in the job. You need to be able to do that. Thankfully, all our guys that have come through here have found employment. I'm very proud of that. So yes, we need you. The country needs electricians. Otherwise, they will de-skill this trade, and it won't be there for my grandchildren and your grandchildren. So if you're deciding to become an electrician, you're doing a valuable thing, and we want to help you do that. So this has been Essex Electrical Training. Thanks for your attention. Bye now.